This is my life of James Maynard Pyle. I was born in Breckinridge County, 1922, near Custer, Kentucky. After 1 year, moved to Hardin County, near Hal Valley. My parents' names were Dan and Lena. My mother, she died when she was 35 years old. She'd had pneumonia and never recovered from it. And I was 13 years old when she died, and it was in December 1935. My mother's last name was Hoskin, and she was born in Custer, Kentucky, and she was really a good mother, good cook, and kept us kids clean, and really done a lot for us. But then when she got sick and with a stroke and died, then we really had it kind of rough, because Daddy had to do the cooking plus helping farm too, and my brother decided he would stay and help Daddy on the farm after he'd finished the 8th grade, but he said, well, you got to have help, and I'm at the farm, and I'll stay and help you. And I went on to school. Then when I was about 4 years old, I started to school with my brother Hansel, 2 years older. My daddy bought a pony for us down in Dyer, Kentucky, which was probably 10, 12 miles. And I rode behind him on a horse down there, and then I rode the pony back, and we came to a creek, and the pony didn't want to leave, so he turned and went into the deep water. I got scared and rolled off up to the waist, and it was in the wintertime, real cold, so he said, just stand here a minute, and he run that pony down and brought the pony back. We went for about a mile into a house, and they went in and built up a big fire and dried off, and then went on home. From then we rode the pony to school, all three of us children, and till the weather got bad. Then we, as we got older, rode a horse, and then started regular walking. Through the Depression, things was pretty rough, because we ate good because we lived on a farm, but we had no money. Hansel and I would work when we were probably 8 or 10 years old, neighbors helping shock wheat for a quarter a day. Hansel would milk cows of a morning, and I'd go run the traps in a creek nearby and trap for muskrats mostly, and mink. Usually catch about 3 or 4 muskrats, plus 3 or 4 legs where they'd chewed off and got away, and come in and skin them and put them on a board. For Christmas, we'd usually get maybe orange and maybe a stick of peppermint candy. And I know one time I got a knife for Christmas, but we really had very little Christmas because we had no money to buy anything with. On Sundays, us kids in the neighborhood would usually gather. We'd have corn cob fights where you'd stick a corn cob, stick in a corn cob and throw it at each other. And then on summertime, we'd play baseball out on a field, and then we'd play a while and go to the creek where we kept our watermelons to stay cold, eat watermelons. So we had pretty good life, and we enjoyed it very much then. My dad was a hard worker, and really a good person, and he done a good job raising us kids by himself, and he didn't remarry till several years later. Well, he told us kids that if we didn't smoke or drink till we was 18 years old, he'd give us a gold watch. So I think we all received them when we got 18. I still have mine. My sister's name was Wilma Jean, and she really had it kind of hard because my brother and I thought we were older. We'd try to correct her on everything, so we didn't really help her like we thought we would. But she grew up, and after her high school, worked at Fort Knox, and then she married and I think went to California. And I lost a lot of track with her then for a few years. I played a lot of basketball and going to school. I started playing when I was in the 7th grade on a midget team, which is a limit of 105 pounds then. And then after I got a little heavier, I played on the first team, 8th through the 12th. We had a dirt court for the first till I was sophomore in school, and we'd play early in the fall when the weather was good, and we'd go to places that had gyms in the winter. And we had, of course, the roads were dirt roads then, and I'd have to walk about a mile before they'd let me off because the road was too muddy for the car, for his coach's car to get there. The first game we played was White Mills, Kentucky. We got beat 54-4, and I made 4 points. But from then on, we got better. Once we playing, I run into a goal post, split my eye open, bandaged up, and kept playing. In senior year, we won. We was runner-up in the district tournament, and I think I made about 17 points. And then we went on to the regional and got beaten in the regional by Ranningville, and I scored about 14, 15 points, made an all-district and all-regional tournament.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Well, on a Sunday afternoon, I'd hitchhiked home and I was going back to work, hitchhiking, and come over the radio that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. Early on, before the war broke out, I didn't really know much about it because we had very little access to news. And while I was working there in Louisville, the war, Pearl Harbor was bombed, and the war then was started in the Pacific. Then I started really hearing everything I could about the war, and knew that most everybody was going to have to go. And so I decided to join and maybe have a preference in whatever branch I choose. I also thought, well, I'd like to be a pilot. I was signed up there in Louisville to be sent to St. Louis for examination and tested. And I failed that because I didn't have any knowledge of geometry and the things I needed to know. So they wanted to sign me up for the Navy, and I didn't think I wanted the Navy, so I came back, and then I joined the Army. I was inducted in Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, sent to Fort McClellan, Alabama for basic training, which was 6 weeks. And it was pretty rough training. Also, I enjoyed the rifle range because I grew up on the farm and done a lot of shooting game. I also won my company in a high score in shooting. And then I won the battalion in a high score shooting on the range, and got a carton of cigarettes for each one I won there. From Fort McClellan, Alabama, we boarded the train, went up to the Northwest Territory. We were on the train 7 days. The train would stop every few hours. We'd all get out and run up and down the track to get some exercise. And of course, ate on the train, but didn't have too much to eat. I went on up to the Northwest, through Washington, back down to Camp White, Oregon, near Medford, Oregon. And then that's where I joined the 91st Infantry Division, and I was put in what they call a S2 section, 6 enlisted men and 1 officer, and our job was to scout and get information to send back to the company. When we was on maneuvers, we would set up around Big Bend, Oregon, on maneuvers, and it was in a desert like, and the sand and dirt was a foot deep. I guess I partially caught dust pneumonia, but I recovered from that. But then that's when there's 3 of us, but I just thought we'd join the paratroops, and we did. But thinking we'd go together, but we was all separated. Then at Fort Benning was real interesting going through jump school. We done a lot of physical training, running, and we had to pack our chutes all 5 times. And that was kind of a scary thing because it had the shot puts in your limb to hold the silk down, and everybody always kidding me by, well, you forgot to put in your shot bag. And but anyway, then we had the bulk-up tires where you pull your way up and turn you loose and let you slide down this rope and jump off of big tires. And it was kind of scary. You also could drop out any time you wanted to if you didn't like it, up to your 5th jump. But once you qualified, then if you dropped out, then you'd probably be sent somewhere else. But and on my first jump, we jumped at 1,200 feet. It was really exciting, but beautiful too, just looking down and seeing the whole country. And of course, it wouldn't take long to get to the ground, but my jumps was all pretty good. I had no mishaps. After graduation at Fort Benning, on the second group that went over, we got orders to ship out, and we was sent up to Newport News, Virginia, where we had a layover of one day. We weren't supposed to get off the post, but most everybody slipped off and went into town just to see the town, and then went back in, and of course they said nothing because we was going overseas. We were assigned to our company, the 509th Parachute Battalion. I was in the 3rd Platoon, and Phillips was one in the 3rd Platoon also. His name was Philip Nechesty from St. Louis, Missouri, and so he was one of our buddies in that squad, and that's where I met him. We loaded this Liberty ship in a big convoy of supply ships. We zigzagged back and forth for watching U-boats, and we was on the water 28 days. We went through a storm or two that was pretty rough, but I guess it wasn't that bad, but it's pretty rough. A boat would be rocking a lot. But I never did get sick going over at all. I guess I was one of the lucky ones. What is interesting, when we went through the Strait of Gibraltar, because up on the deck to look out to see the Strait of Gibraltar and everything. But then when we got in the Mediterranean Sea out 2 or 3 days, we had a big air raid, and they were bombers dropping bombs everywhere, and we weren't supposed to get out of the hole. We were supposed to stay down underneath on account of the bombs. But of course, when that bell rang, everybody wanted to see, and we all run up and got on the deck and watched those planes dropping those bombs. And one ship, I remember, was hit and a lot of smoke going up, so I'm sure it sunk. Then we went on into the harbor at Naples, and Naples was just a sight. It just tore all the pieces from the bombing. We stayed outside Naples and trained there. We made 3 practice jumps down in Salerno, southern part of Italy, and that's where I seen ones. They dropped us pretty low, 300 or 400 feet, so we wouldn't be in the air too long. One person's chute fell over and had a complete streamer where it went down. Oh, I was probably 300 or 400 yards from where he was at, but of course, I'm sure that was the last of him. In our training, we was trained in Italy for a while, and then we sent up outside of Rome and was doing training. But then every night they'd take truckloads of us into Rome just to see Rome. So we went into Rome there several times just sightseeing, and then we was sent up to an airfield up in Italy, someplace where we left to go to southern France. On the way up, it was pretty quiet because everybody was, I guess, nervous. But you could look over and see the ocean part of time and the land part of time. And so you really wondered, where am I going to drop at? And when we got to southern France and they hollered, got to southern France and the light went on, the red light went on, stand up and get ready to jump. And then when it was hollered go, I was second or third man, and the guy that was in front of me was named Mullins, and he froze, and so we all had to, everybody, just so many of us, we just pushed him back to the back of the plane. The rest of us went on and jumped. And then when we jumped in southern France, D-Day 1940, D-Day 15, August 15th, 1944, we jumped real low, maybe 300 or 400 feet. And as soon as my chute opened, I could see the ocean. Then after a second or two, I realized I was going to miss it 200 or 300 yards. But one plane load of them did drop in the ocean, and 17 or 18 men drowned. And I knew some of them on the plane there. There was a mail carrier and different ones from our company. After I'd been on the ground about 15 minutes, I caught this bullet to my chest. And then Philip was nearby, best I remember. And of course, I fell to the ground when it was hit, and halfway out, not really realizing too much. But then when he came to help me, I threw down all my equipment because I had so much equipment on. I couldn't stand up with all that equipment. So with his help around my shoulder, I was partially walking, he was partially dragging me, and we went down for maybe a mile over gullies and ditches, and we got down to this place. We knew where we was going because we'd seen the signal lights where the assemble at, and there were 8 or 10 people already assembled there, and so they dressed me a little bit because I'd lost a lot of blood from nowhere to stop it, and there they put me on a board or something and taken me up a couple hundred yards maybe to a French home. And I was put in this French home and passed out, and I didn't know anything for about 10 hours. And I woke up, and this little French girl feeding me milk out of a spoon. From there, that night, they taken me back to this ship, hospital ship, and put on this ship. And while I was in that harbor waiting to get out, they bombed us pretty good, but I was so much out of it, it didn't bother me at all. Then we was back through the Mediterranean Sea to Oran, Africa. I don't know how many days we'd taken because I lost track of the days, maybe 4 or 5 or whatever. Unloaded at an big old dock in Oran, Africa, and had the driveway up was big old rocks, and they put me on top of a Jeep on a stretcher, and then just saying it killed me. We went out at the edge of Oran in this desert where they had a tent hospital, and the temperature was 100 degrees or more, and so I stayed there, and well, they did some operations on me to smooth the bones, I guess, where the blood had come out. I was there about 2 months. Our outfit stopped at the Maritime Mountains. They were sent up to the Battle of the Bulge, and that's where Phil Netesky got killed, I later learned. But it was so bad up there at the Battle of the Bulge, and it was in this forest from what I hear, and they'd just be fighting out there and laying in the snow and sleeping at night, and just one of them had frostbite feet and hands, and slowly when the battle was over or when they was relieved, there was only, I read where there was only 14 or 16 out of the regular ones that still had made it. But most of them, a lot of them had been either killed or wounded. After I got wounded, the company, their mission was to go up along the coast up towards Cannes and Nice in France, and they fought battles all along with the Germans. They'd taken over Cannes, and according to some of the boys, Cannes and everybody really came out and celebrated because they were glad to get out from under the Germans. And then the company went on up into the Maritime Mountains where snow was a foot deep, and that's when I was sent back and joined them, but I couldn't keep up with them, so they sent me back to Cannes, to a hospital where I stayed a couple of weeks, and they reclassified me and sent me to a staging area over in France, and was put with the 35th AAA Brigade anti-aircraft outfit, and my job was riding a truck. There's a radio and a scanner on some kind of screen they had there. But it wasn't much to do then because the Allied planes had already just pretty much wiped out the German planes, so there wasn't much activity at all. And we just followed along behind the infantry. I guess the infantry shooting their guns. And we were anywhere from 6, 8, 10 miles behind the lines. It wasn't really in any danger much. But I can remember one field we went by where hedgerows and different things, there's just hundreds of them laying out in the field. They hadn't had time to pick up the bodies. We more or less just followed the entry on the ground, and wasn't really any fighting, except we'd come along. The entry wouldn't have time to ransack houses, and we'd come along get out whatever we could. That's when I got a pistol and 2 knives from some house. I remember one place right more or less edge of the Alps. It was in France, and cold, snow deep. Have to stand guard for 2 hours and then get relieved, and you'd just be froze almost. And then we went on up to one house we stayed in an old house, and that's when my bowels had to move, and I went out to the edge. And I made a quick trip because I could hear some bullets flying. We stayed there a couple of weeks and followed the Army all down into the Bavarian Mountains when the war was over.
More than 200 political prisoners were burned to death at this concentration camp near Leipzig. Others, among the original total of 350 inmates, were shot down by German elite guards as they dashed from the prison huts to celebrate the arrival of American troops outside the city. The atrocity story is told by the few who managed to survive. They relate how 12 SS troopers and the Gestapo...
We knew about the Holocaust quite a bit from word of mouth, but didn't have any idea how bad it was. But some of them I've actually seen those camps, and they just no way to describe it, because they just, as you all have seen pictures, I'm sure, they're just stacked up in places and butting over the gas chambers and then gas and just everything in the world. When you got back, of course, you're happy to see the United States. So it's just a thrill, I say, just for it to be over and you could get back to regular life. I got back in 1945, November, I think, and then I started working for Boone's and worked there 42 years as a route salesman, and played a lot of basketball and softball and baseball and for activities. And then in 1947, August the 9th, Doris and I married and lived together for 64 years as of now. I played baseball at Rogersville, which is Radcliffe, and she lived there. Her dad had a baseball field back of his house. She would stand out in the yard pushing her lawnmower back and forth, waiting for me to come back because I was going to Fort Knox. I was closed back and forth then. And so that's the way we got started. We had dated for about a year or more, I guess, before we married, August the 9th, 1947. After I was back, I was still single. Howard Junior Shively, her brother, and I was having a baseball tryout at Harrisburg, Kentucky. And we said, well, let's go up there and just try out for more or less for the fun of it, because we knew we couldn't make it. But anyway, we was up there 3 days in the tryouts, and the first day, the ball hit me on the thumb and broke my thumb, and I couldn't have throw. But I don't know, there might have been 1 or 2 picked up from that group, but of course at our age then, what, 24, I'm sure people that age wasn't even looked at then. But it was an experience to go to the training camp. We got married in Louisville, Kentucky, went to the Steelback where we had dinner. I remember having frog legs for dinner. Came back the next morning, played baseball that afternoon. I remember I got 1 hit. We didn't go anywhere for a couple of months because she was working at a Kroger store, and we both had vacations coming up. So on our vacation, we decided to go to St. Louis to And my thought was to see St. Louis Cardinals or the Browns. So we drove, of course, it's a long drive in, stopped at a little old motel, and just kind of a little shack-like almost, spent the night, and the next day we drove, and she didn't know where we was going, and drove up in front of the stadium and seen the St. Louis Browns. And the best I remember there is seeing Satchel Paige pitch. And then he was probably 50 years old, but it was just kind of a thrill to see him pitch one inning, I think it was. Hansel and I talked together, and he wanted to farm, and I didn't want to. But he didn't have enough money, and I had enough. We bought the farm where he lives now for, I think it's $6,100, and we put it in halvers, and I was going to pay him so much a month for him doing my work. And then after 5 or 6 years, he was having a family and needed the land, and so we had a sale and sold, divided up, and then I went on to work and he went on the farm. Jimmy, our oldest son, he was born in Louisville in 1950. After about 3 weeks, we got a call and she was about ready to deliver. We went to Louisville. They kept her there a couple of days, the Baptist Hospital, I think, a couple of days, and sent her back home because she wasn't ready. And then we went back 2 or 3 weeks later and delivered Jimmy. And then we lived down in the country, but stayed up as her mother's son. But then we lived down in Howell Valley for a couple of years, and then we moved to E-Town and bought a house on Long Avenue. 5 years later, we had another boy named Danny Plow. He was born. Then 5 more years, we had a girl named Carolyn, and that was our family. As our kids grew up, Jimmy went to college, and then he started working for Boone's for a while, and then he got into his business in the carpet business. And then Danny was going to school down at Emory Theological School, and had to drop out because of his health. He was having kidney problems. In 1980, I gave him a kidney, which worked for 7 or 8 years, and then rejected. He was on dialysis for 2 or 3 years. Then in 1991, he received a second one from a donor, and still going great as of today. And Carolyn finished school at Western and went on to teaching. And then her husband died when he was 28 years old, and then she was single for about 12 years and married Jim Gifford, and they're still living together. I managed a little league team, and Jimmy was on the team once, Danny was on the team, and managed for 18 years, and got to know a lot of boys that went through the program. I have 5 grandkids, Jeff, Janae, and Lindsay, Emily, and Josh. My great-grandchildren's names are Ann Elizabeth, Mary, and Rachel. And you great-grandson, Jackson. When we come home, it seemed like nobody really talked about their experiences. Very, very little. And just everybody went back to the regular routine. And just, there wasn't much talked about it by individuals till up along late years. Maybe it really opened up, I think, after the Declaration of Washington Memorial. I think after that, then I think reporters and everybody started telling stories. But before then, if I remember, nobody ever mentioned it. I don't imagine a lot of people ever knew where I was in the Army or not. I mean, people that just, because you just didn't talk about it. I don't know why. I'm very pleased with the life I've had, and that pretty much sums up a little bit of my background.